다른 지계 군대 남아서 폐회 손장 인계기 담시에 로 먹어 주는 삼스데이네 다 코나무서 폐회 손장 아니디 진년도 수쇼베나 투벤스웨메와 상무도. Today, as we celebrate the historic occasion of the 63rd anniversary of the Tibetan Democracy Day, on behalf of Tibetans both inside and outside Tibet, the Kashak submits our deepest obeisance to His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama for democratizing the system of Tibetan polity. The Kashak would also like to extend our sincere greetings to the distinguished guest, the Swedish parliamentary delegates, Honorable Member of Parliament Margareta Elisabeth Sederfeld, Johanna Homberger, you will speak later. I'm just mentioning all the names. Mary Charlotte Nicholson, Maria Victoria Stockhouse, Alexandra Anstrel, Anne-Sophie Liffenhage, John E. Weinahall from the Moderate Party, all of them from the Moderate Party. And then we have Honorable Member Richard Johannes Jomshof and Björn Soda from the Swedish Democrat Party, Honorable Member of Parliament Gudrun Margareta Brunegard from the Christian Democrats Party, and Honorable Janine Sophia Alm Eriksson from the Green Party. 다른데 첼시 소바 제가 신에 아니 스웨덴 그 조선에 노신의 폐열에 대단 냠도 아니 Mr. Carl Matthias and Mrs. Christina Eva Maria Bjornstad of Swedish Tibet Committee, England, we would also like to extend a warm welcome to the delegates of the CDA's donor conference from different parts of the world. On this occasion, we would also like to send our hearty greetings to all Tibetans, both inside and outside Tibet, as well as to the supporters of Tibet and Tibetan people spread across the globe. The Kashak's last two statements issued on Democracy Day briefly touched upon how His Holiness the Dalai Lama instilled and conferred a culture of democracy among the Tibetan people over the years. These statements also provided a general overview of the development of the three pillars of democracy within the Tibetan administration. Today, we shall delve briefly into the phases of evolution of the constitutional history of Tibet. When we look back into the history of our legal system, we had the laws of 2 penalties and 5 approaches. We are talking about more than 2,200 years back in the history of Tibet. We had the laws of 2 penalties and 5 approaches during the reign of Nyatitsembo, the first king of Tibet. 10 divine virtues and 6 codes of conduct during Emperor Songtsen Gampo, and the 5 codes and 5 laws during the Tibetan imperial period. The period of disintegration of Tibet for 400 years witnessed some deterioration in our legal system. The reign of Sakya adopted the best practices of then prevailing Mongolian laws, followed by the 15 legal codes during the reign of Pamodrupa, the 16 legal codes during Debatsangpa, and the 13 legal codes during the Gandepodang. Thus, Tibet throughout its history had evolved its own national laws, religious laws, and laws governing human conduct. After coming into exile, His Holiness the Dalai Lama promulgated the Constitution in 1963, which initiated major reforms in the traditional administrative structure and introduced a system of check and balance amongst the 3 pillars of democratic governance. While upholding the core values of our traditional, temporal, and religious legal codes, such as compassion, justice, equality, nonviolence, and environmental consciousness, the Constitution also safeguarded the fundamental rights and freedoms of the people. Moreover, this Constitution laid the essential groundwork for the adoption of the Charter of the Tibetans in Exile in 1991 by the democratically elected members of the 11th Assembly of the Tibetan People's Deputies. From 1960 to 1990, before the adoption of the Charter of the Tibetans in Exile, the deputies served as members of both the Assembly and the Tibetan People's Deputies, as well as the Standing Committee of the National Assembly. Half-yearly and yearly work assembly meetings of both central and local civil servants, as well as representatives from all settlements, were convened by the Assembly of Tibetan People's Deputies to discuss and deliberate upon all issues concerning administration and public welfare. These meetings provided a platform for the representatives of people at the grassroots level to participate extensively in the decision-making process of the administration. Between 1972 and 74, the rules and regulations governing the functioning of the Election Commission, the Public Service Commission, and the Tibetan Freedom Movement were also formulated. A high-level national committee comprising of Kalons, that is ministers, members of parliament, and senior civil servants was formed to discuss and decide on important national matters. All these developments laid a robust foundation for ultimately realizing a democratic system of governance within the exile community. A special Tibetan People's Meeting was convened in Dharamsala from 11th to 17th May 1990, which was attended by 369 people, members of the Kashak, members of the parliament, senior civil servants, representatives of various Tibetan Buddhist traditions, Tibetan non-governmental organizations, people's representatives from various Tibetan settlements, and also representatives of the newly arrived Tibetans from Tibet participated in this meeting. At this historic meeting, His Holiness the Dalai Lama dissolved the Kashak, or the cabinet, or Kalons. Those times were appointed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and the 10th Assembly of Tibetan People's Deputies. As authorized by His Holiness, this special meeting elected 3 Kalons to the interim Kashak. His Holiness urged the meeting to discuss and propose any necessary democratic reforms. Subsequently, 14 important resolutions were passed at the meeting, which paved the way for the establishment of a Tibetan Justice Commission and the expansion of the strength of the Tibetan Parliament to 10 members each from the 3 traditional regions of Tibet and 2 each from the 4 Buddhist traditions and the native Tibetan Bon religion, as well as 3 members nominated by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Furthermore, a 5-member Constitution Drafting Committee was also constituted. Assuming its role as the Constituent Assembly, members of the 11th Tibetan Parliament and the Constitution Drafting Committee discussed and deliberated upon the draft charter on 30th May 1991. On 31st May, following the election of the officiating speaker and deputy speakers, the rules and regulation of parliamentary proceeding and conduct of business was adopted. After intensive discussions on the content of draft charter from 3rd to 13th June 1991, all the sitting MPs signed the Charter of the Tibetans in Exile on 14th June 1991. His Holiness the Dalai Lama ascended the Charter on 28th June 1991. Over the last 35 years, the Charter has undergone 35 amendments. Over 85% of them are related with the qualifications, election processes, and responsibilities of the dignitaries of the 3 pillars of Tibetan polity, Kashak, Parliament, and the Supreme Justice Commission. About 15 of these amendments were specifically related to the Kashak, or the cabinet, including 6 of which were made after 2011. If we look at the legislative accomplishments, 11 legislations were passed within just 2 years of the adoption of the Charter. These include rules and regulations of parliamentary procedure and conduct of business, rules and regulations of the Standing Committee of the Tibetan Parliament, administrative rules and regulations of Central Tibetan Administration rules, rules and regulations of the Public Service Commission, exiled Tibetan rules and regulations on raising funds, annual budget and financial management, rules and regulations of regional Tibetan freedom movement committees, rules and regulations of Tibetan voluntary contribution and other contributions act, rules and regulations of the Office of the Auditor General, rules and regulations of the Tibetan Parliamentary Secretariat, rules and regulations for the allotment of staff quarters and retired staff quarters, and rules and regulations for the presentation of Excellency Award to the outstanding staff of CDA. Between 1995 to 2015, within a span of 20 years, 15 rules and regulations were adopted, including 6 related with the privileges and benefits of the dignitaries. For instance, Tibetan Parliamentarian Housing Rules, 1995, Tibetan Parliament Speakers Relief Trust Fund Rules, 1997, Exiled Tibetan Electoral Rules, 2000, Central Council of Tibetan Medicine Act, 2003, 6 different rules and regulations related to the salaries, allowances and privileges of Justice Commissioners, Members of Parliament, Sikyong, Kalens, and the heads of the 3 autonomous bodies, 2004, Settlement, Housing and Land Use Regulations, 2005, the Act regulating the Council of Tibetan Religious Affairs, 2009, Daily Allowance and Other Entitlements of the Members of Local Tibetan Assembly Rules, 2010, Rules on Collecting General Donation, 2011, Rules on Officialization of the Works of Non-Standing Committee Members of the Tibetan Parliament, 2015. However, since 2015, no new legislation has been passed. Among the rules and regulations mentioned above, the Act regulating the Council of Tibetan Religious Affairs remains unimplemented, whereas certain others have gradually lost their effectiveness. The rules and regulations of the Tibetan Public Service Commission saw the highest number of amendments, 26 times, followed by the Exiled Tibetan Election Rules, 20 times, and the allocation of staff quarters and retired staff quarter rules, 19 times. The Parliament has already endorsed the bill put forth by the 16th Kashak, aimed at standardizing workforce demarcation within the Tibetan administration and establish structured criteria and prerequisites for special appointments. Once again, the Kashak is preparing to introduce a new bill or amendments during the upcoming session of the Tibetan Parliament. This proposed bill aims to introduce additional amendments to the rules and regulations of the Public Service Commission with the goal of enhancing the overall structure of the Tibetan workforce and fostering uniformity in their privileges and benefits. Similarly, in alignment with the amended articles of the Charter, we are currently engaged in a thorough review of the regulations that oversee our electoral processes. The Parliament has already granted approval to our proposal bill, which aims to enhance or enlarge the residential quarters of our entry-level civil servants. This bill also includes provisions to address any conflicting perspectives that might arise during the allocation of staff accommodations. To secure long-term sustainability of Tibetan settlements, the Kashak has initiated measures to enable the internal transfer of land and housing amongst Tibetans. Additionally, provisions have been provided for individuals residing abroad if they occupy their settlement residences for a minimum of 1 month. Within a 2-year period, they can retain their house and land rights and will not be required to relinquish them to the administration. In yet another advancement in our legal system, as per Article 67 of the Charter, which empowers the Tibetan Supreme Justice Commission to establish its own rules of procedures and codes of law, the Judiciary Code, Civil Procedure Code, and Evidence Code of the Tibet Supreme Justice Commission were formulated in 1996. In accordance with the provisions outlined in the Charter, additional regulations governing the operations of our Election Commission, Public Service Commission, and the Office of the Auditor General were developed. Similarly, the Kashak had also established a series of administrative rules and regulations. These rules and regulations are continuously undergoing revision to adapt to the evolving needs of the times. Furthermore, as per Article 82 of the Charter, which empowers the local Tibetan Assembly to create its own rules and regulations governing local activities, a total of 39 local assemblies have enacted their respective rules and regulations. These rules and regulations have established a strong legal groundwork for the administration and its financial management. The entitlements of dignitaries and civil servants, as well as the rights and liberties of the populace, these regulations have not only bolstered the effectiveness of all aspects of our democratic governance, but have also safeguarded the rights and freedoms of our people. In the guidelines for future Tibet's polity and basic features of its constitution, promulgated in 1992, His Holiness the Dalai Lama had stated that, I quote, "Personally, I have made up my mind that I will not play any role in the future government of Tibet, let alone seek the Dalai Lama's traditional political position in the government." Consequently, in 2011, His Holiness devolved all his political and administrative responsibilities to the elected leadership. Last year, on the Democracy Day, the Kashak appealed to constitute a Charter Review Committee, and finally, the Parliament's newly constituted Charter Review Committee has commenced its work. We, the Kashak, have also submitted our proposals. We earnestly hope that both the committee and the Parliament will give due consideration to the insights and opinions received extensively from the general population, including the civil servants of the Central Tibetan Administration. The Kashak upholds that the rule of law stands as a cornerstone in guaranteeing equality and justice, which are the embodiment of democratic values. For those of us who believe in the democratic principle of ultimate power residing in the hands of the people, our nation's trajectory of progress depends upon the active participation of its citizens in shaping and implementing the Central Tibetan Administration's fundamental objectives and public policies. Even though we have made remarkable achievements over the years, our aspiration for freedom in Tibet remains unrealized. Hence, the Kashak would like to reiterate our appeal to stand united in the face of challenges. On this occasion, we would also like to take this opportunity to convey our deepest gratitude and appreciation to all the supporters for your unwavering support for the just cause of Tibet and its people. We look forward to your continued solidarity and friendship. In conclusion, we pray for the long life of His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama and the perpetual flourishing of His Holiness Dalai Lama's endeavors and fulfillment of all his noble aspirations. Thank you very much. And as I explained in Tibetan, this Democracy Day, we are not celebrating with cultural performances because we live in Himachal Pradesh, and Himachal Pradesh over the last 2 months went through a very difficult time with the incessant and unprecedented rain in some of the regions which took away many lives and also destroyed a lot of properties, including public properties, the highways and the roads. So therefore, to express our solidarity and bereavement with the state and people of Himachal Pradesh, we have decided not to organize any cultural shows today, but instead, all the civil servants of the Central Tibetan Administration will contribute 1 day of their salary to the Chief Minister's Relief Fund to express our solidarity with the state. And I want to assure the Chief Minister of Himachal Pradesh that the people, the Tibetan people who live in Kulu, Manali area and Dolanji area, whose lives have also been affected, we assure you that we will look after their rehabilitation once the rain subsides a little bit. We don't want to put the burden on the Himachal government. We want to take the responsibility ourselves and look after their rehabilitation. So again, I want to thank the central government and the state government of India and the people of India and all the dignitaries, guests who are present here for expressing their support. I told our honorable members from the Swedish Parliament, today they are 30 in number and one of the biggest parliamentary groups in Tibet, on Tibet. And historically, I know only the Swedish explorer, Sven Hedin. He had been to the northern frontiers of Tibet in 1895. So that was our relation with the Swedish people. And last time when we were, myself and the representative from London, when we were in Sweden, that was also the time, same day when your Prime Minister took oath of office, and we were there at that time. So I'm looking forward to more concerted and cooperative effort working with the Swedish parliamentarians, and we will have more meetings and discussions that will follow after this official function. Thank you very much.
고모 토지나